he was here a couple years ago and gave us an update, so he's going to give us an update today in class, and then he's going to bring a sermon next. So Ben, come on up. Good to have you here. Good to be here. Hopefully your travels were good. Yes. All the weather. Very.
Morning. We really appreciate you all hosting us this weekend. We just like visiting other congregations anyways, but also with you guys specifically, we just feel, even though we're separated by a state at least, depending on which way you go, feel very blessed by you all. We do have a number of supporters for the work going on in Carbon Valley, but Bellevue Church of Christ is significantly larger than most of them as far as the monetary contribution, but also the regular encouragement that we receive from some of you. It does go a long way, and we very much appreciate that. And I think that since COVID, the church generally has lost some of the connection that we used to have between congregations. And I do think things are going back in the direction where they should have been. But, you know, I think I can see that even within the churches just in the Denver area. But to know that we have good encouragement and connection with people across state lines and hopefully even worldwide is I think, what God's intent was with the church, right? And so when I say we feel very blessed to, I guess, be sharing in the work of the church with you guys, I mean that very much. So we really appreciate everything you guys have done for us. If any of you don't know who I am, I know Ron just gave an introduction and mentioned the work that we're involved in, but it's not just me. I forgot my clicker. By myself. My family.
I'm not sure where the sensor is.
Okay.
Up there. Up there.
Are you in there, guys?
It's such a
Turns out you need to turn it on. There we go. Okay, that's what ON spells. My family is here with me this weekend. They're in the kids' class right now, getting settled in. So my wife, her name is Riley. We've been married since 2018. My oldest, who's on the bottom left in that picture, is Mattis. He just turned 5 years old. The one next to him, he's Titus, and he is 3. And then most of you met them last time we were here. The new one that I'm holding in this picture is Lucas, and he is 16 months. Okay, cool. Got it. That's good to know. Thank you. And so we've been involved with the work in Carbon Valley since 2018. If you were to Google Carbon Valley, Colorado, you actually wouldn't find anything. Really, you might find some information, but there's no town called Carbon Valley. It's a reference to this map, and this is north of Denver. Down like at the bottom of the picture, right outside the frame, is the metro area of Denver, so we're up north a little bit in Weld County. If you are familiar at all with Colorado geography, you'll notice that Boulder is over on the left, and then the major town that's near us is Longmont. So if you've ever been to Longmont before, you might have actually driven through our area. It's actually kind of an up-and-coming area, and I'm going to get into that. And I know this is some introductory stuff, and I'll get into more of like the actual work that's taking place, but I just kind of want to get everyone's bearings together. So we call it Carbon Valley because it's not one town. There's actually 3 towns. So in the north, if you can read that, you have Firestone, which goes all the way up to Highway 66. In the middle is Frederick, which is where we live. That's where the church is currently located. And then on the south, on the other side of Highway 52, you have Dacono. Dacono is easy to distinguish from the other two because it's separated by a highway, not a freeway, but just a highway. Frederick and Firestone, even though I've lived there for 7 years, I still don't know the difference between the two of them. They're very much, it's not a straight line dividing them. They're kind of like a jigsaw put together. Sometimes I found out I'm a Firestone, and I didn't know that. So the reason we call it the Carbon Valley Church of Christ is because we didn't want to kind of get ourselves stuck in a certain position if we had to move, or we actually still don't have a church building. So if the Lord blesses us with land, we don't want to have to change it from the Frederick Church of Christ to the Firestone Church of Christ or something like that. So saying Carbon Valley works because everyone locally knows what that refers to, and also just kind of keeps us from having to deal with some stupid logistical nightmare that was preventable. So that is the location of this congregation. The population is actually kind of interesting, and this is going to be relevant to some things I'm going to bring up in a minute. It might feel kind of dry, but it's interesting. The current estimated population of Firestone, at least as of July 2025, was 2,762 people. In 2010, there's a little bit over 8,800 people. So you can see there's a significant growth that's taken place just in Firestone, the northern of these three towns. Frederick, which is in the middle, currently estimated to be at 18,241 people, which is up from 7,700 in 2010. So significant growth. We've seen both of these towns more than double in size over the last 15, 16 years. Dacono hasn't seen as much growth numerically or even per capita, but there is still significant growth there. 69% growth over 16 years is pretty significant. One of the reasons Dacono hasn't grown as much as the other two is the I don't know if it's the mayor, but whoever is in charge on the governmental side of the town of Dacono just isn't interested in expanding the town. As far as residential things go, but even from a business standpoint, they're just kind of keeping things how they are. The other two are welcoming the growth that's coming into the area. There's a lot of young families that are moving into this area. But they, especially Frederick, I think has done a good job at keeping the small town feel of the area, which I appreciate. There's a lot of community events that is beneficial to us in our mission as the church that's trying to reach out to the community. Why was the church planted in Carbon Valley? This was only planted back in 2018, and anytime something that is done like this, I think why is a good question to ask. Oftentimes churches are planted, I would say, as weird as it sounds, maybe for not so good reasons. For example, if a congregation splits, I would call that a bad thing, right? Now, hopefully at least one of the two parties in the split is sound and it has a heart that's seeking to serve God, and that's where the incompatibility came with. Sometimes I think there's just two groups of people that can't get along for reasons outside of what the Bible would say, and then you have a split occur. That's not the case here. Sometimes you'll have a congregation that grows, and this would be a good thing, and they kind of, instead of just keep growing the building, will kind of like, you know how bees will swarm and go start another hive somewhere, we'll kind of do that and they'll plant another congregation. We've seen that happen before. That's actually not the case here either. This is a very much a grassroots plant. But why was one in the area? There was not a congregation in this specific area prior to 2018. The nearest one to this area is the Mission Point Church of Christ, which is about 19 minutes away. This is actually the result of a split that did occur from another congregation in 2022. So at the time that Carbon Valley was planted, this congregation wasn't around. The next closest would be over in Longmont, about 20 minutes away, the Twin Peaks Church of Christ. They've actually supported our work. Several people from our congregation actually grew up at Twin Peaks. Some of them still have family there. They're a very sound congregation, but it's about 20 minutes away. The Northwest Church of Christ is the next one, which is actually Northwest and Mission Point are the ones where the rift occurred. I've only heard one side of the story. I'm not developing an opinion. To my knowledge, both of them are still sound. I don't know the issues that occurred there, but the next closest would be Northwest Church of Christ. And that's not a message we necessarily want to advertise to people we're evangelizing to either. The Brighton Church of Christ, again, we've had several members who are or were members here at Brighton. The Kingsburg Church of Christ, which is actually where Riley and I were worshiping and working with that youth group prior to working with Carbon Valley, is about half an hour away. And then Loveland, up to the north, about half an hour away. Windsor, a little bit further to the east from Loveland, about 36 minutes away. So to put that on a map, since I'm sure not everyone has memorized Colorado maps before, those stars represent these other congregations. Loveland and Windsor are going to be up north above this screenshot, but what you can see is there's this hole in the middle. Now, looking at that map, you might think, 20 minutes, who cares? Probably at least a few in here drove more than 20 minutes to get here today. Growing up, we lived in a town called Bennett out east of Denver, but we worshiped for several years in Castle Rocks, which is south of Denver a ways. It was about, on a really, really good day, a 50-minute drive, but it's about an hour to get there. And so the idea of driving 20 minutes to go worship isn't something that bothers me. However, it's kind of hard to evangelize to your next door neighbor and convince them to drive 20, 30, 40 minutes to go to worship whenever there's two large active churches not Church of Christ, but congregations that are, walking distance from their house. It's kind of a hard sell, right? And so there's the preacher, his name is Clayton Johnson. He noticed this as he was trying to reach out to his neighbors. He was, at the time, a teacher in the St. Vrain district. He lived in Frederick, Colorado. He was known in the community, but he had a hard time getting people to come worship with him at Brighton. And so what he decided to do was he quit his profession as a teacher and started going to school at the Bear Valley Church of Christ. Bear Valley Church of Christ runs the Bear Valley Bible Institute. And so he was a student there, and I had met him previously when I was a teenager, but he and I were at school at the same time. I was a year ahead of him, so our times there did overlap. And he told me what his intent was to get a congregation started at Carbon Valley. So that's exactly what happened. In 2018, the church plant started. He graduated from Bear Valley in 2017, then he did a 2-year internship down in Durango. Midway through that, the congregation got planted. The idea was for there to be some momentum, so that way by the time the preacher came in full time, they were able to just hit the ground running. So it started off, counting him and his family who were in Durango, there was 4 families involved. David and Nikki Rosine, probably none of you know them, but they're great people. Rick and Alda Krill are a couple others, and then Bill and Pam Stewart, who some of you do know. Of course, Bill has gone to be with the Lord since then, but those were the groups that started this congregation. At the time, they were meeting in the library. It's still local. So they were meeting at the local library, and then if that room was ever booked, they would go to a conference room in a hotel. So there was a little bit of trying to figure out exactly where to meet, but that got disrupted in 2020. In 2020, of course, COVID prevented people from meeting in public places. Colorado kind of being in lockstep with the national recommendations, it was hard to get together. And so for a period of time, no one was able to get together. That was difficult to navigate. I'm sure you all had your struggles navigating that as well, especially from a leadership standpoint, trying to figure out what is the correct way to move forward. Because the Lord's work needs to get done, God's people need to worship, and yet the government is telling us to do certain things. I'm not giving an opinion on COVID response, but it was difficult to navigate. Riley and I were supposed to join the work at Carbon Valley in April of 2020. We were very involved with the youth group in Keensburg. In fact, I'd say we were doing well. We were growing a lot there. We had a great connection with the youth group there. But after visiting Carbon Valley in fall of 2019, we realized that we were lacking in something that we should be developing, and that is an evangelistic heart, an evangelistic mindset. Because while we were thriving in youth ministry, there wasn't really any outreach. Like you might talk to a coworker and say, hey, you should come to church with me, but working in Boulder and trying to get them to come to Keensburg, it's kind of a struggle. And if you know anything about Boulder, you'll know why that's an additional struggle. It's a pretty godless place. I'll just say that. So we made the decision to work with Carbon Valley, even though there was no youth group at the time, because we needed to develop our evangelistic, I guess I'm going to say skills, right? We need to have more of a heart that's geared towards going out to the community and preaching the gospel to those who are lost, which is something that a lot of people need to do. That's why the Lord has a church in this world, or at least one major reason he has the church in this world. And so we decided to step out of our comfort zone and go work with this congregation that would kind of force us to step out of our comfort zone and reach out to the lost. We were kind of forced to, I say, because it was such a grassroots early church plant, that was just kind of what was going to be required of those who were getting on board kind of earlier on. But also Clayton and his wife Rihanna, I would say, excel in this department. Probably most of you, maybe none of you, have ever met Clayton before. He's self-described as an awkward person, which is a good description of him. But what's interesting about it is it's not off-putting at all. Now, sometimes if you're standing there on the sideline and you know him and you can see him with his little tics or whatever, when he's talking to someone new, you might feel uncomfortable. But what's interesting is the person he's talking to usually feels seen, like there's not a show that's being put on, because usually the preacher has to present himself as someone who's put together and blah, 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 blah. And that's fine. Like, there is a professional aspect to this, but you also need to be relatable to people. And I think letting people see how uncomfortable you are is something that helps you be relatable. And so we've tried to learn from this, and I have tried to not necessarily mimic, but gain confidence in the ability to recognize that it's okay to look silly at times, right? I'm naturally introverted. I'm very shy. My inclination is to just kind of stand in a corner of a room and watch what's going on rather than get involved. but we need to get involved. So all that to say, this is why we decided to join Carbon Valley. That got disrupted. We were supposed to join up the beginning of April of 2020 and leave Keensburg at the end of March. But because of COVID, that kind of got cut short on both sides. But the church did start getting back together in May of 2020, and we started meeting at a farm. The people I mentioned before, David and Nikki Rosine, part of the original group that planted it, they have some farmland. They cleared out half of their shop on their land. That's where we were meeting for a few years. It was at the same time that we joined the work. In 2022, we ran into a good problem. We outgrew the shop. We couldn't hold everybody. So if everybody showed up and visitors, which were actually becoming more of a thing, then there was standing room. And actually, no, there wasn't even standing room because the chairs were just filling up the whole place. So it was actually pretty uncomfortable sometimes, which is awesome. And so we moved to the local K-8 school. There were a variety of options that we looked at, but this is the best one. And so the growth that we saw, at least from the time that Riley and I got involved and started paying attention, I'm not saying we are the ones that caused this, but this is what we have seen for ourselves, is that initially there was about 31 people getting together, which is already a big jump from the 8 plus 3 kids in 2018. In 2021, the average went up just a little bit to 33. However, in 22, it jumped up quite a bit. The average was 48. So that's the average. We figured the shop that we were meeting could hold about 50 people. So on average through the year, we could fit in there. But if we understand how averages work, there were times that we exceeded 50 by quite a bit, because there was also times that we had, 31, especially if there was snow or something. So for the bulk of 2022, we weren't fitting in there. And so we moved into the school, and then we saw continued growth. It's a good thing we decided to move, because the next year we jumped up to 57. 2024 went up to 72. The last time I was here, I reported the 2023 numbers, not the 2024. So this is new information, unless you've been looking at the newsletter that I'm not very good at sending. You've noticed this one. 2025, last year our average was 81. This year so far, our average attendance has been 86. And this is just for this, oops, I messed that up. The 2026 Sunday morning worship assembly. Bible class is a little bit lower. Wednesday evening is quite a bit lower. But our average so far this year has been 86 people. Again, understanding how averages work, there are some where we're lacking. We're down in the 60s. There have been a couple where we're over 100. What's nice about the school that we're meeting in is we actually have, I don't know what the fire code is or how many seats there are, but we could go quite a ways over 100 if we needed to, so that's good to know. So we have room to grow in here, but we would still like a building at some point, but real estate is ridiculous right now. So what are we doing? The numbers are there, and we're not chasing numbers. I hope I'm not conveying that aspect at all. We're not chasing numbers, right? Truth, salvation comes first and foremost. The numbers, hopefully, though, are an indicator of people who are excited to get involved. One thing that we are pretty adamant about doing, and when I say we, I mean the leadership of the congregation, is whenever someone comes in, get them involved. They need to be part of the work too, right? We don't go to church to be consumers. We get involved with church work. God called all of us to be disciples. God called all of us to serve Him using our various gifts. For some people, it looks like going out and evangelizing. For some people, it looks like doing service projects. For some, it's a mixture of both. There's so many different things. However, everyone needs to be involved with the Lord's work. And so whenever someone comes in, we try to help them understand that they need to get involved with the work as well. And we actually have, I don't think the 90-10, right? Like 10% or 10 people doing 10% of the people doing 90% of the work, which is pretty common. I don't see that here. I will say some carry larger loads than others from a visible standpoint. But generally speaking, I'd say everyone is involved, and hopefully this 86 number is indicative of that, rather than just we're trying to appease people by tickling their ears and bringing in numbers. That's not what we're doing. But what are we doing? There are a number of things we've gotten involved with in the community. There's a park that we have adopted, so to speak. It's the park that a lot of events are held at, and we're the ones that pick up the litter. It's actually, well, we don't have to go out there a ton, but several times a year we do go out there and pick up the trash, and so we get a sign that has Carbon Valley Church of Christ on it, which is nice on a number of levels. One, we should be giving back to the community. The Lord has blessed us with a beautiful area to live in, and we should, I think, show our gratitude to him by serving the area. Also, the visibility helps because we don't have a church building. We're meeting at a school, everyone knows where the school is, but no one looks at the Thunder Valley K through 8 and thinks, yes, the Carbon Valley Church for Christ, right? So we lack the visibility that a building does offer by itself. And so having little things like that just kind of help people at least see that this is a thing. Whether they look into it or not, I don't know. But we're big on trying to promote some visibility in the community. We also get involved with the town events themselves. This is from this past December. There's like a tree lighting ceremony that they do at the park in downtown Frederick specifically. And so we run a booth there where we're not selling anything, but we're there just to engage with people. And at this particular event, one of our members, his name is Trey, makes, I think we got the recipe from him actually. He makes some hot chocolate, and it's not Swiss Miss. It's good, thick, creamy hot chocolate. And there's a couple varieties that he makes, right? It's white hot chocolate. All right. See, I never look because it has a lid on it. But there are other groups there, like the town of Frederick also has a booth, and they do the Swiss Miss hot chocolate, and no one ever drinks that. They come over to ours, right? And people talk to us, and I think this past year he actually started giving out cards with the recipes, right? That's just a way to talk to people. What we're actually there to do is engage with them, get some visibility, but also in those conversations over the hot chocolate, maybe you'll actually learn that this person has a need. Maybe you'll learn that this person is looking for a congregation. And so there are a few other events. We don't get involved with every single one because several of them is pretty much just you donate money and then you get your name thrown on a banner. We're not really interested in those ones so much, but the ones where we can have a booth, which are 4 events in the year, those are the ones that we invest in monetarily. It's not that big of a donation, but invest our time and our energy into manning the booths, making sure people are there. And we actually have seen some fruits yielded from these, which is cool. Before we got involved with these events, Clayton and I met with a preacher down in Castle Rock because demographically, economically, the Carbon Valley area is about 20 years behind Castle Rock. And so Matthew, the preacher there, has been involved with that. He's also a great evangelist. And so we met with him and we asked him his opinion on doing the town events. His response basically was, you can't expect to see any results from this. Mostly what you're going to see is people who at one time were part of the church that stopped worshiping because they moved away from wherever they were, and they fell out of the habit of going to worship. And then they might reconnect with you, and then they kind of become, I guess, revived and start going to worship again. That's what they've seen, at least at the time we talked to him about 4 or 5 years ago. That's what they had seen in Castle Rock. So we went in with the mindset of, well, at the very least, we're putting our face out there, and maybe we will encounter some people who were part of the church but aren't anymore, but now they're coming back in because they were introduced to us. What we've actually seen is Bible studies be set up. We've seen friendships formed, and we have had people come in and be converted and are still part of the Lord's church through events like this. Now, it's not a lot. And right now, as I'm thinking about it, there's only one that has actually stuck around, who we met through one of these events. But really, in my mind, if one person was saved, then it's worth it. We should be doing stuff like that. So that is one thing that we're getting involved with in the community. What I also like about these events is you can use anybody, right? Like I said, we all have different gifts. We all have different talents. We all have different levels of comfort that we're willing to work with. Hopefully, we're pushing that comfort boundary a little bit at least, because that's where growth occurs, is when we're uncomfortable. But even if someone is kind of unwilling to push that boundary, it's not that hard to get them to show up and set up tables or set up the booth or maybe even talk to people or run the art stand or make hot chocolate or whatever it is that they need to do. Everyone can be used at these events, and we try to use everybody. This past winter, we also got together and made these bags. I don't know how easy it is to see what's going on in that picture, but they're just gallon-sized bags with stuff that we put in them. I don't think we actually used any church funds for this. I think everyone gave from their own personal bank accounts to purchase these items. But these are for the homeless in the area. If you're driving somewhere, I always see them when we're leaving Costco, there's like a homeless person on this corner and a homeless person on that corner that's asking for money. And yes, you can give them money. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. But it's also highly debated, especially in political circles, whether that's actually beneficial. And some will say, well, they might not even be homeless. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm concerned about if they are actually homeless, am I actually helping them or am I enabling them? That's really my concern. I think that's a lot of people's concerns. That's a valid concern. Now, I could say, well, that's really between them and God, which is true. So we can give them cash and risk enabling them, or we can give them a bag that has food and water in it. And a message where they can learn how to contact us. A little brief message about who we are, what we believe in, and maybe in just a few words can help them see that nothing we can give them is going to be worth more than the blood of Jesus Christ. So maybe help bring them into contact with that. So always looking for ways to go out and give back to people. And at the very worst, we gave somebody food and water. At the worst, that's what happens. So always looking for opportunities to do things like that. So that's what the church is doing. But what about Riley and I? So when I say our involvement, I'm talking specifically about me, but I'm saying me and Riley, or Riley and I, because, well, we work together, right? Elders are supposed to have wives for a reason, according to God's wisdom, right? Guys, we're not really capable of a whole lot on our own, are we? But it is still, right, I'm the face of the operation, I'm the youth minister, but Riley is helping me in this. But what are we doing? So particularly, we're involved with a few areas. One of them is family ministry. Within the congregation, we place a high premium on fellowship. When I say we, I mean Riley and I really see that there's great value in getting together with the church, right? The Bible, if you're going to look at either the wisdom of Proverbs or the habits of God's people or the habits of Jesus himself or of his disciples, what you'll see is that people who love God spend time around people who love God. Now, we're not isolated, right? I'm not saying we should be monks or anything like that seclude ourselves from society, but we should primarily be spending time with people who are like-minded. We will be shaped or at least affected by the environment around us. So we need to make sure that we spend the bulk of our time with God's people, influenced by God's people, who are all being affected through his word, rather than spending most of our time hanging out with really anyone outside the church, even if it's family. And so we want to promote fellowship in the congregation. Again, not having a building, we don't have a single location where we can just reliably meet at. So we have to get a little bit creative. Right? Any space we use, we either have to pay for or we have to reserve it. And it's kind of hard to do because the town is outgrowing the rate that the facilities can accommodate. So getting like the library room is not as easy as it was 6 years ago. But we do things like on Sunday nights during the summer. We don't have a Sunday night assembly. In the past, we've done things like Bible classes at somebody's house, where we've gone through, there's a couple of books on evangelism that we would read and then kind of get together and discuss some of the things that we picked up from that and see how we could implement them into what we were doing as a congregation. But during the summer, we decided to really emphasize fellowship. And so we all just meet at a local park and we just hang out and play games. This serves a couple purposes. One, we get to spend time together. It's not all just about being serious and studious together, although that's important. But it's also about getting to know each other. It's also about having fun with each other. God created us to enjoy things, so we should enjoy things with each other. Also, this has worked as an evangelism tool. Inviting someone to come to worship, they might feel uncomfortable, right? Most of us don't like just walking into a room of people we don't know, especially if they've never been part of the church or really any church. They have no clue what they're walking into. So that might be uncomfortable. It might be hard to get them to come along. But saying, hey, you want to come and play volleyball? They're probably more likely to say yes if they're sports-oriented, right? Or you can hang out and play cornhole or frisbee or whatever it is we have going on, or just sit there and eat food. Most people like that. So it's a lot easier to invite them to that. And we actually have seen some good results from this aspect as well. Cool. I need to move along. We also do a family fun night once a month where we get together and share a meal and play a game together. And there's a different person that hosts it every week. But Riley and I are the ones who kickstarted this and promoted it and really got it going. And now it's just kind of taken off and is almost running itself. But it did take some work to kind of gear everyone towards getting together. Also, there's this thing that it's on pause for right now because everyone was having a hard time with other things going on. But it's called House to House. So once a month, different groups who want to be involved will sign up and they'll go to a different host house. And so for 6 months, you're meeting with the same group one Sunday a month for lunch. And just get together and share a meal together. And Sometimes we've even been like, everyone is studying the book of Esther together. So then when you get together, you can discuss the things that you discovered in Esther, right? So again, just promoting a lot of cohesion and a family environment within the congregation. We are also, and I'd say more heavily involved in the youth ministry with Carbon Valley. Whenever we started at Carbon Valley, there was no youth group. But because of the growth that we've seen, and the growth is reflecting the community around us, and that it is primarily young families, we actually have a lot of kids in the congregation right now. I guess I don't know exactly what the ratio is, but there's quite a few kids. So one thing that we encountered for the first time this year is we have seniors who have graduated from high school. We just had 5, and so we put a little banquet together. All the parents got to get up and give a little, I'm going to call it a speech, basically to their senior. We're proud of you. These are the things that we've enjoyed seeing in you. This is what we hope for you in the future, those kind of elements in that speech. And then they did a slideshow with them. So we did that for each of the seniors. I gave kind of a charge that isn't, the things that I said weren't very new to a lot of them. And I'm going to kind of revisit this in the sermon as well. But we're seeing that people are leaving the church when they graduate from high school. A lot of people within the first 5 years of graduating from high school leave the church, and it's tragic. And so I have been trying to instill a culture that takes that seriously and seeks to not accept the statistics, but rather push back and be the ones who are different. And again, I'm going to talk about that more in the sermon. But we're very proud of these kids who have graduated, and you know, with them graduating, you'd think, well, you're losing a big chunk of the youth group, which is true. They're almost, of those who are actively involved, about a quarter of the youth group. However, we have a new wave that's also coming in, so there's going to be some changeover that's happening. Something else that happened with the youth group for the first time this year is we actually had to split the classes. We've had everyone grade 6 through 12 together this whole time, but what we saw, I'm the one who teaches that class, and what I was seeing is that there's not everyone was on the same page, because you had some of the, especially like the juniors and the seniors, who were able to keep up and even hungry for more. And if I'm going to move at a pace that's actually beneficial to them, we were kind of leaving, you know, the 6th, 7th graders in the dust. So if I was going to kind of like pander to them a little bit, and I don't mean pander in like a belittling way, but kind of like speak more to them so that they could keep up, well, then the older kids really aren't getting anything. And so I brought this up to the leadership, and we actually made the decision to split it off. So now we have a junior high and a senior high class, and I think that's actually worked pretty well. So I'm still involved with the senior high class, and the junior high class is, there's been a couple dads in the congregation who have kids in that age group that have been teaching that class. And that's another thing we're trying to promote is getting not just anybody to fill those seats, but getting specifically the dads of the youth to be the ones that are in a teaching rotation, because they should already be teaching their kids at home. It would also be good for the kids to see their dads teaching in the congregation, whether it's that or one of the littler kids' classes or the adult class, whichever it is. We want to get more involvement with that. So that has actually opened up an avenue for this as well. A focus that we have every year is a theme verse. The first year we started doing this was in 2024. The theme there was He is Alive. And so a lot of our studies, whether it was Bible class or teen devos or other studies that we were doing, were centered around either apologetics, which was, I'd say, about half the year was just apologetics. Wow, that was fast. Or because He's alive, this demands something of me, was what all those lessons were centered around. 2025, our theme came from 1 John chapter 1, verse 7. If we walk in the light as He Himself is in the light, then we have fellowship with Him, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, cleanses us from all sins. No, I'm sorry, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, cleanses us from all sins. So the theme was walking in the light. What does it mean to walk in the light? How do we continue to walk in the light? Because we'll all accept we need to walk in the light, but we need to clarify what that means. What does that look like? So that as the youth group, we were focused on that. This year comes from Isaiah 43, verse 1. You are mine. There's a song that some of you might know. It's called Do Not Fear. When you pass through the water, I will be with you. When you pass through the water, I will be with you, and the waves will not overcome you. That's how the lyrics are formed in the song that we sing, but they come from Isaiah 43, verses 1 through 3. And the reassuring part of that when he says do not fear, you do not fear because you belong to him. And so there's been a lot of emphasizing we shouldn't fear the things in this world, even though it's a scary place. There's been a lot of, because you belong to him, you need to act like you belong to him, right? No one can separate you from him except for you, so don't do that. Also, we need to identify ourselves as children of God. There's a lot of confusion regarding identity in the world today, right? A lot of that comes from forgetting who we came from and who we belong to. So if we accept that we belong to God, that we came from him, that he loves us, that he saved us, self-loathing is going to decrease. Depression is going to increase. Confusion is going to decrease. I meant to say decrease a minute ago. All these bad things that we're seeing as a trend in society are what we should expect from a society that's becoming more and more and more godless. So we're trying to instill in these kids that we belong to him, and nothing can change that. In fact, that should do a lot to give us a lot of encouragement and confidence in the things that we do, because we belong to him, and we belong to him because of what Jesus did for us. Without Jesus sacrificing himself and going through the things that he did, we can't belong to God. But because he did that, we get to. So we came at a high price. And he paid that high price because he loves us so much. So we're really trying this year to instill that mindset in the kids. We haven't decided on our theme for next year, but that's something that we're doing every year. We're also trying to promote more involvement with the church. And I'm going to expand on this a little bit more in the sermon as well, but I just want to give like a couple examples, or at least one, depending on the bell, is getting them involved in the church now, right? Like, yes, legally they're children, but they have the capacity and the ability to serve the church now, especially if they've been baptized. If you can accept that you are sinful, if you can accept that Jesus died for you and you can put Christ on in baptism, you're capable of serving the church. And so that's what we've been trying to push them to do, and we've seen that. An example, and this is a simple example, but I think it's indicative of the heart of this one boy who just graduated. He wanted to get more involved with leading in worship. So he's gone through preacher training camp, for example, and he's actually preached a couple sermons for the congregation, which I love. He also wants to get more involved with other things like song leading. I wouldn't say we have a shortage of song leaders, but not everyone is ready to just get up and lead singing either. There's about 5 guys, and I'm currently also the worship coordinator, so I'm kind of hyper aware of who's willing to do what. And so this boy, his name is Landon. I don't think I even asked him to do it. I think one day he just approached me and said, hey, I want to learn how to do song leading, but wasn't really confident in his ability to do so. So every Friday for a period of time, he was coming over to our house, and I was just showing him, hey, this is, we were going over how to read music, which he already knew because of band and stuff from school, but here's some things that you need to do. So we went over and I trained him, I guess you could say, with song leading. The reason that happened isn't because I asked him to, but it's because he has a heart that seeks to serve the church. So hopefully he's not the anomaly. And that's just one example. There are other examples. There are some of the girls who can't do something like that. However, they're the ones that are always inviting somebody to come to our events, not just to hang out and have fun, but actually seeing it as a way to kick open the door to get a Bible study going. And they do have ensuing Bible studies, and they have actually had some struggles in at least one of their friendships that I'm aware of because they're not backing down from the truth and their friend can't accept it. So they're seeing that even though we're legally children, we are actually children of God, and God has placed us here to work. And so I think that that'll help a lot with the retention of keeping these graduates in the church, is getting them used to working and seeing their value in the church now as opposed to when they're 25. There are other things I could talk about. Other things I'd like to give updates on, but I really have loved being part of this work. All right, that's okay. Well, the last slide just says thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all very much. We do speak very highly of the Bellevue Church of Christ, and your generosity and your desire to see the Lord's work being done. I can't thank you enough, and there's been more than one occasion where you actually delivered at a time where we really needed it. Right? Living off support is not the easiest thing to do. It can be stressful, and there have been more than one occasion where you guys were, scored the saving goal, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. But thank you so much for your not only monetary support, but for your prayers and for the encouragement that we receive from you. It means a lot to us, and thank you so much for having us out this weekend as well. We enjoy coming out here and are just glad to be able to, so thank you.